Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my May into June AM reading 2022. Basically, I had a couple more books that I started in May that I didn't get a chance to talk about in my usual AM reading videos. I was hoping I might get this video up on the 31st, but what do you know? But anyway, I'm just here to talk about them really quickly right now. My AM reading videos usually are rather long and rambling, and I usually do start with reading a short story from Dorothy Parker's short story collection, but I do feel like this feels like an unofficial AM reading update to me. I just want to keep things short and sweet, so I'm just going to dive right into the books. There's one book I talked about starting in my last AM reading video that I have since finished, and that is Beyond the Synagogue, Jewish Nostalgia as Religious Practice by Rachel B. Gross, which I read as my non-fiction pick for the Maybe Midrash Readathon. The Maybe Midrash Readathon is a May readathon where participants are supposed to pick a serious work of fiction and a serious work of nonfiction, and also a film this year regarding any world religion, and I focus on Judaism, and this is the brainchild of Jason from Old Blues Chapters and Verse. And this was a little bit of a doozy of a read. Yeah, I tend to, I guess maybe a lot of religious, serious nonfiction possibly, I mean, other than memoirs, could get a little dry, at least, you know, subject matters that are especially academic. You know, Gross is a professor, and she's positing this thesis. She's talking about different forms of Jewish cultural expression, or at least that's what people would usually think of them as, such as, you know, actively seeking out Jewish food, Jewish educational toys and books for your children, visiting restored Jewish heritage sites, you know, usually synagogues, and delving into genealogy, especially in this era of advanced technology. She is positing that those are in fact a form of religious expression. And it made me think about that. And, you know, I at first sort of bucked against that idea, I guess, that no, of course that stuff isn't about religion. I mean, why can't we just call it cultural expression? But then I don't know, the way that she talked about it made me think that maybe I was being short-sighted, especially when I started to think about these sorts of activities, particularly with food and with raising children, that these are the domain of women usually, and sort of before the Enlightenment, especially, you know, when Judaism was contained to, like, you know, you lived in your Jewish town and everything was centered around the community. That's mostly what women did. You know, they weren't part of what I consider religion. You know, they didn't go to shul, or if they did, they didn't really participate in the religious aspects of text study, and even having to observe those strictures to the same degree because they were too busy caretaking. So it made me think that maybe I could call this religious, because it's a way of reclaiming those sort of domestic aspects of Judaism. So that interested me, made me think. But in general, the writing was so dry that I kind of found this book to be a little overwhelming. So it'll be interesting to wrap this book on up, because in the next few weeks I hope to do a maybe Midrash wrap-up video where I'll talk about the fiction book I've read as well, and the movie that I've yet to watch, because I'm a little late on things, but I guess that's okay. But stay tuned for that in the next few weeks. Speaking of Jewish fiction, I am now in the middle of two books, novels. Neither are for Maybe Midrash, but they were at the top of my GoodReads TBR, so I wanted to get to them this month. They are On Bittersweet Place by Ronna Wineberg and The Wayward Moon by Janice Weizman. And yeah, I started these really late in the month because I really had to privilege my BookTube prize reading earlier than this. So now I am hoping to finish them very soon, like at the end of this week, hopefully, and then I can, you know, get my May newsletter up and all that good stuff and get to my, you know, monthly June TBR. So anyway, yeah. Also, these were both published by small presses, although I believe neither of them are producing books anymore, but I will leave links anyway. On Bittersweet Place was published by Relegation Books, and this is a stereotypical, in a way, historical American Jewish retelling. Well, it takes place maybe at the tail end of stereotypical historical times. In the 1920s, it spans, I guess, a few years in the mid to late 1920s. We are following Lena Chernitsky, who is a young girl, 13 to 14 years old, a recent immigrant from Ukraine, although, it's they refer to it as Russia because, at the time, we're probably getting hopefully relatively more familiar with this history given what's happening recently, but Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire and then folded into the USSR, and they particularly immigrated after the October Revolution. Her family was a Jewish family. They were a relatively well-off family, and they were targeted by Cossacks and the Bolsheviks, saying that Jews were evil and you had to kill them, and they went ahead and killed her grandfather. So the rest of the family snuck out of the country into Poland first, and then into America in spurts. And now it's been a few years, I think, a couple of years, since the family is living in Chicago, in Illinois, in an apartment, a small apartment. And it goes through Lena's life. At first, she lives in this apartment with her uncles and her parents. Her father actually immigrated to the States years before and tried to set things up for them there. And then they sort of, really rushed their own timetable after their family was targeted. So it's a sort of unfocused novel. There's like every chapter is almost like a new sort of drama that happens. There's a lecherous uncle that she kind of has to deal with, and then there is a death in the family of a small child, and then another uncle has a mental breakdown, and then she's dealing with an anti-Semitic teacher at school, and then there's a love interest, and etc., etc. And I guess I go back and forth. I think some of the reviews say it's like a little too much, like just, problem after problem. And in a way, I kind of, I can appreciate, life sometimes gives you a bunch of stuff at once, and a lot of times Lena is ruminating on what it all means at once, and maybe I can respect that that's somewhat realistic, but also I think the language is a little too cliched and dramatic as well. But I still appreciate it. It really gives an idea. There's, I think, also an underlying sense of trauma in a way of what happened to them in Ukraine, and how that affects how they view their lives as new immigrants in the States. And also, it's a growing up tale, just what it means to grow up as a new immigrant in this particular time and place, and it's fun to get the historical aspects, of course. And then with The Wayward Moon, we move way further back in history. In fact, I think one of the blurbs on the back of the book is, it's like a breath of fresh air to get, Jewish history that is not about, the Ashkenazi Jews moving to America in the 19th to 20th, early 20th centuries. So anyway, this one takes place in the 9th century, and it takes place in Babylonia, which is in modern-day Iraq. So this is where Jews started living after they were exiled. And in this particular time, it's about the second exile from Israel and Jerusalem by the Romans. Anyway, a lot of Jews are now settled in Babylonia, including our protagonist, who's a 17-year-old young woman named Rachel. She is the daughter of a physician, and her father is setting up a marriage for her. And, things are going to, well in that regard. But then the inciting incident is her father is tasked by the governor for this high-up position. And things are complicated with the Muslim neighbors. Non-Muslims, especially, I think in this case, Jews, were seen as less than. There were things they weren't allowed to do because they couldn't, be above Muslims. But running for office, Weizman, I think, takes care to say that most of the community is perfectly okay with Jews being part of public life, but there are a few anti-Semites, and some are violent, and Rachel's father is killed by one of these men who is upset that he is taking on a powerful position, and then Rachel kills him, and she has to flee her home. So she goes ahead and she dresses up as a boy and is trying to sort of sneak off to a great uncle who lives somewhere else. And of course there are adventures along the road. I guess I have mixed feelings about this sort of situation. You know, having a young woman on an adventure like this means that we can talk about women in history in a time when they were often, you know, ignored. And there's not a whole lot of information about their lives, or at least we don't know about specific women, Jewish or Muslim or Christian, often in these times. Although I guess technically speaking, it's unusual to think of a young woman, I suppose, who would, you know, kill someone in self-defense and then, you know, have to flee. But it gives a fun way, in a way, to look at the life and times in, I guess this would be early medieval Babylonia. And in the Jewish history therein, which is largely overlooked now because it's so far in the past. So yeah, again, I am enjoying this book, and I really love the historical details, and especially that it's new and fresh, and certainly, yes, different than the usual Ashkenazi and America stories that we read. But again, I think the writing can be a little bit too melodramatic as well, so I struggle with this, you know. I'd love to find, like, really, you know, vibrant and well-written pieces of literature that have, you know, these great stories and these great historical details, but maybe are a little better written too, because I'm a snob. Oh yes, and this book was published by Yotzeret Publishing, which focused on Jewish-related fiction, but alas, I believe they went out of business in 2019, but glad that Weizman was able to get this published beforehand. So that about covers it for me now, and yeah, I just want to take the time to go ahead and finish these books as quickly as possible, and hopefully get my literary newsletter up, and I got so much other stuff waiting for me to do in the wings, including prep for my next video. I am hoping to be back on this channel imminently, because yesterday, as I filmed this, Robert announced the official winners of the quarterfinals and the BookTube prize, and also the matchings for the semifinals for round 3. So excited, especially after 2 months of saying that I'm behind on my quarterfinals reading. I finally finished it up and sent in my ballot. And now I get to discuss with you how I ranked my 6 books in nonfiction Group A and why I ranked them the way I did. But first I want to go ahead and write a good script like I usually do, and get my reviews onto GoodReads now that I am able to do that. So I have a lot of work to do in the meantime, but I really hope I can get this video up relatively soon. It's getting noisy outside my condo, so yeah. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. And I'll see you next time.